Hey, Guoyacine here. It's been a short while since our last sustain, but Hyacine will not disappoint you. Castorice fans, Acheron enjoys, Feixiao believers, and of course, Blade Gigachads will all have a treat coming for them in 3.3. But even outside of them, she remains a sustain that will just work and will deal damage. So let's check her kit out and then review her Eidolons with my calculations. Then it's on to best builds and light cones, and finishing with pool value and team synergies. Like and subscribe if you want to win your Hyacine 50/50, and let's begin. Hyacine is a Wind Remembrance unit, and she is the first of this combo. She is also our first Remembrance Sustainer. Now, despite being HP scaling, her base HP is quite poor, but she does have a very high base speed to compensate, and we'll see later that she goes supersonic. For trace priority, I would just level everything except her basic attack. The Memory Strike skill and her talent are focused on damage, but her Memory Strike talent and her skill and ult are focused on healing and team buffing. Let's check out her abilities, and first we have to address the chunky Pegasus in the room. Little Ica, who will probably end up eating Flame Reaver, is Hyacine's Memory Sprite. First, Little Ica's HP is set in Hyacine's talent. It will be equal at all levels to 50% of Hyacine's max HP. Furthermore, when Hyacine or Ica provide healing, Ica will get an 80% damage buff stackable up to 3 times for a whopping 240%. Does she remind you of Tribi yet? As for the speed, that is set in the Memory Sprite talent. Little Ica in fact will have 0 speed and will not appear on the action order, which is a new one for Memory Sprites. They can still be attacked by enemies, but at least they will also be immune to debuffs. So then, how does Ica actually do anything? Well, first of all, if ally targets have their HP reduced, Ica will consume their own HP to heal those allies. So not only does it work like Bailu's Invigoration when enemies hit you, but it will also heal you if an ally consumes HP. So for example, Jingliu or Castorice or Blade or Mydei. Ica will be doing this healing passively whilst they are on the field. No abilities are needed. Now, actually acting is a different thing, and Ica can only act whilst Hyacine is in the after rain state, which we'll see later. Every time Hyacine uses an ability in this state, Little Ica will get an extra turn and use Rain Cloud's Time to Go, which is the Memory Sprite skill. So now they kind of act like a follow-up attack after every Hyacine ability, but of course it's not actually a follow-up. And the after rain state will also buff Ica's healing. So now all allies will get additional healing every time HP is reduced, even if only one ally had their HP reduced. So a Blade reducing his own HP will get that first heal, and then all allies including Blade will get an additional amount. And so finally, that Memory Sprite skill. One of the most gorgeous animations to exist, thank you Ica, and this ability will do damage to all enemies. Now interestingly, it's not HP or attack or def scaling. It instead deals damage equal to 20% of the tally of healing done by Hyacine and Little Ica in the whole battle. So these little heals bit by bit from the Memory Sprite talent, as well as big chunks of healing from Hyacine, will all stack up for a ton of damage. Obviously though, after performing this skill, 50% of the tally will be cleared, which avoids you ramping up to infinite damage. So how do we get Little Ica on the field, and what does Hyacine do? To summon Little Ica, you will first have to use Hyacine's skill. This will also be restoring all allies' HP by a certain amount, whilst healing Ica by a little extra. This could be because they're a cute Pegasus that needs more love, but it's really because Ica will be consuming their own HP. The other way of summoning Ica is through Hyacine's ultimate, but it's going to be that first skill that gets him up and running. Her ultimate will also heal all allies just like the skill, and it will then enter Hyacine into the after rain state for 3 turns. This duration will be reduced at the start of her turns. The after rain state, as said earlier, will let Little Ica use that Memory Sprite skill. It will also improve Ica's healing, and here we can see that it will finally also increase max HP of all allies by 30% plus a flat 600. This is a pretty substantial bonus for HP DPS, unlike our previous HP buffs on sustains. But it also benefits non-HP scalers and your team in general by just offering a large survivability boost. And speaking of summoning, when summoning Ica, Hyacine will generate an extra 15 energy. But you have to actually summon Ica, it can't be on the field already. And if it's the very first summon, you get an additional 30 energy, which enables a very convenient first turn ultimate, letting you enter after rain immediately. Finally, her technique will heal all allies at the start of combat. Useful in some game modes, but not really an endgame, right? Except, it will actually be nice to get some immediate damage percent for Ica, and it will also let you immediately activate the brand new Warrior Goddess Relic set coming out in patch 3.3. This technique will also increase all allies' max HP by 20%, which will stack with her after rain state for an incredible buff to your first rotations. Now onto traces, starting with that A2. Hyacine and Little Ica will straight up just have 100% crit rate. Sorry Kokomi. Now you'll just be doing damage without having to build specifically for it. And then Ica and Hyacine will have their healing buffed if healing a target under half health, neat. Her A4 will then increase her F-res by 50%. Ica is immune to debuffs, but Hyacine is not, and this now lets you spec into some F-res, make her totally immune as well. Very useful on a sustain. And for her allies, well, every skill and ult will be a team-wide 1 debuff dispel too. Finally, her A6 will buff Hyacine and Ica's HP by 20% when Hyacine's speed exceeds 200. Then for every, wait a minute, 200 speed? Yes. Do not be frightened by this number, it's not too hard to get in reality as we'll see in the build section. Anyway, if you go past that 200 speed, every single speed point afterwards will also give 1% healing bonus to Hyacine and Ica up to a maximum of 200 excess speed. No, we're not hitting 400 speed, but I guess it's just a soft cap for Divergent Universe or something. But if you don't know about the 200 speed breakpoint, this means in the first cycle, she will always take 3 actions, and every subsequent cycle, she will always take 2 actions at least. This is kinda insane. In trace bonuses, Hyacine then gets an amazing 14 speed, 18% F-res, and 10% HP. This will bring her pre-build speed to a whopping 124, as well as her F-res to 68%, only requiring 32% in substats for full immunity. Let's check out her vertical investment now with an Eidolon review, starting with that E1. When Hyacine is in the after rain state, all allies will now get an extra 50% HP buff. Yep, that's 80% HP and a flat 600 now. Furthermore, she steals Gallagher and Lawatch's kit identity, and now allies will also be healed after using an attack. You are never dying. E2 will increase speed by 30% when any ally loses HP, and this is not just for Hyacine, it's for any ally target. With her S1, this is thus a permanent team-wide 30% speed buff. This can be used for cool speed breakpoints on the team, but it will also buff Hyacine's outgoing healing from the A6. E4 will bring some power to Hyacine's damage, now converting every excess speed past 200 to 2% crit damage on top of the healing bonus. And finally, E6 is both a massive boost to Hyacine's damage and a decent boost to the team's. 20% all-type res spend when Little Ica is on the field, but also now, after using the Memo Sprite skill, the healing tally will only be cleared by 12% instead of 50%. That is obscene for her damage gains. Here are my Eidolon calculations for Hyacine in a Castorice team with RMC and Tribi. You can see how much Castorice's damage increases depending on her Eidolons. I wouldn't take my E2 calculation at face value though, since it's entirely dependent on if it gets you a bunch of extra actions and dragons or not. It can be really good or just decent. But now we can move on to builds. As a healer, we aren't too complex, and Hoyo is even helping us out by releasing a perfect new relic set. By the way, a video on these sets will be out soon, or it might already be out. It will give Hyacine a 12% speed buff in total, whilst also giving all allies and Memo Sprites, including herself and Ica, a 15% crit damage buff. But if you want to use her right away on release, a 2-piece mix of Sakados and Hackspace will be the usual classic banger. We need that speed after all. For your planar ornaments, you can really use any supportive set. Obviously, the new Giant Tree planar set was made for this hyperspeed healer, and is her strongest set for heals and for ease of build. But if you want some energy instead, then Penacony or Lushaka are great options, and Broken Kill is also nice for team-wide crit damage, just like the new Relics set. For your main stats, they are pretty much set in stone. Your boots should always be speed, your orb should always be HP, and your rope should always be energy unless you're doing a sussy hypercarry team. And then the chest should be healing, but you can also run HP percent if you're lacking one. And so for stat goals, 200 speed should be your first goal, and that will include the extra 6% you'll get in combat from the Warrior Goddess set. With speed boots, the Herta shop cone, and her best relic and planar sets, you are already at 182 speed. You'll be good to go. For HP, 4500 HP is a good baseline goal to achieve. Then you can stack up crit damage and effect res, otherwise there's no real crit damage goal, but for F-res you can specifically hit 50% to get full debuff immunity with the A6. And remember, you have 18% in stat bonuses. But now let's check out her light cones and her signature. First off, an 18% speed buff, fantastic for her, but also supportive remembrance units in general. Then, when the wearer uses a basic, skill, or ult, you'll consume all allies' HP by 1%, interesting. Then you will deal an instance of damage equal to 250% of the total consumed HP when your Memory Sprite next attacks, okay? Then when the Memory Sprite uses their skill, increases damage taken by all enemies by 18% for 2 turns. This is a vulnerability effect and is a debuff. It's a lot of random stuff, but basically, you're faster, you consume HP very frequently, which is useful for some characters, and then you deal more damage, and then you also give team-wide damage amp. This cone is nutty, but for most teams, you can run the free-to-play Herta shop light cone just fine. You have weaker team damage amp and weaker speed, but you don't need the extra stuff necessarily. RMC will just have to revert back to using Victory in a Blink, which is just fine too. Now, in a Blade composition, this cone is insane. Every Hyacine turn giving Blade a stack, on top of every ult, leads to some serious follow-up attack frequency. In an Acheron composition, this cone is also awesome if you want to run Hyacine here, as she can now apply debuff every turn of hers in the after rain state. And for Castorice, it's really nice for more HP consumption and thus Ica healing and thus more new bud. But actually, I don't think you need this for Hyacine with Castorice. My testing found her absolutely fine and amazing without it. It is, of course, a decent upgrade though. Speaking of upgrades, in terms of power increase, this cone is similar to Hyacine's E1 for Castorice team. But since the cone is cheaper, is pretty, has Little Ica, and makes her work amazingly with Blade, and makes her work with Acheron, all leads me to definitely recommend S1 over E1. Oh, and RMC can use the cone. Before we look at pull value, let's talk energy. She has a high cost of 140, as well as a desired ultimate rotation of 3 turns. How do we make this happen? First, let's consider a 3-skill rotation. This will lead to maximum healing, aka maximum new bud, but also maximum Hyacine damage due to ramping up the healing tally. This rotation is only doable in low SP consumption teams, which are usually, conveniently, also her best teams, aka Castorice or Blade teams. With an energy rope, you end up at 131.4 energy. You just need to be hit 1 to 2 times, and remember, Memory Sprites being hit also contribute to energy, so this is pretty much a guaranteed 3-turn ult. But what if you don't have the SP? For example, Blade still consumes SP, and maybe your supports will want to. Or in the case of an Acheron team, Acheron wants a skill every turn. Well, then it's up to being hit a ton or a 4-turn rotation. Let's say she has the SP to skill at least once, so skill basic basic. This has us ending up at 107.5 energy. We need to take around 30 energy worth of attacks from enemies. This is doable in some cases, and ironically thanks to Ica also being able to tank damage. In some fights though, you won't be able to hit this, and you'll have a skill basic rotation. The more basics you do, the less you heal since no skills, and so the less damage you deal. And if you don't hit a 3-turn rotation, well, you drop even more healing from the after rain bonuses. You lose out on that 30% HP, and you also lose out on Ica attacks. And with the signature light cone effect specifically, fewer Ica attacks means fewer debuffs for Acheron teams. But do you even need to spam skill? I think this will be a misconception just like on Huohuo release, where we expect Huohuo to always need to skill for her talent. Downtime is fine on a sustain now and then, and what really does ult uptime do for Hyacine? For the HP scaling teams, she wants uptime for the HP % bonus. And for those teams, skill spamming is better new bud generation for Castorice, or more talent charges for Blade. But they do not struggle with Hyacine energy at all, since they consume less SP. For other teams, After Rain is just giving her more damage and more Ica attacks, as well as a bit more healing. But 1 or 2 fewer Ica attacks isn't the end of the world, especially since the healing tally is still building up regardless, and for healing, she will do fine without permanent uptime. She can perform at her peak damage-wise when she can skill spam, but she doesn't need to use it. You can absolutely use mostly basics in these high SP teams and still survive. And in fact, having a 200 speed unit able to provide SP is kinda crazy. And finally, some teams will even want you to use basics. With all that being said, is she worth it? Where can I run her? Castorice teams, I think she is absolutely worth it, even at E0S0. She brings such consistency to Castorice's new bird generation, no more relying on enemy count like Gallagher, or attack frequency from teammates with the Watcher. Instead, we have a 200 plus speed healer that can spam healing out the wazoo. She heals every turn, and every time allies' HP is reduced or consumed by Castorice. But that's not all. Ica consumes their own HP in the base kit. It's not just healing, it's consuming and then healing, double dipping in new blood. And finally, having a Memo Sprite makes Castorice's consumption and the team-wide healing even stronger, as there is now another target. She buffs Castorice's HP too if you care, which also helps with Tribi if you have her, and she gives vulnerability with the S1. But the Pegasus in the room is that she provides so much damage of her own. Lingsha needs a Super Break Enabler or a Hypercarry team made for her, but all Hyacine needs is a dual DPS buffer in the team and some skill points. The difference it makes having not only a powerful healer, but also a character that can kill low enemies for you is immense. And remember when I said you need a Tribi ideally for Castorice in Pure Fiction? Well, Hyacine removes that need, as we now have a Tribi-esque sustainer because of her sub-DPS damage. And so now we can replace her with Raw May just fine. But what about non-Castorice teams? First, her non-S1 teams. I mentioned Mydei here as he is HP scaling. Hyacine increases HP and also offers her own sub-DPS damage, which is fantastic. But she heals a ton over time, not in big chunks, which is what Mydei needs if using a sustain. And the HP consumption part of her S1 is incredibly negligible for Mydei, so all you have over other healers is some HP, and again that damage, and maybe amp from the S1. I'd rather just stick with Gallagher or Lewatch for Mydei, and even then, Mydei can run sustainers fantastically, so why even bother? Anyways, being at 200 speed does wonders for attack frequency, whether that be with Ica attacking or Hyacine using a basic attack. So in comes Feixiao and even The Herta. 3 actions every first cycle, 2 actions every following one, sub DPS damage that is improved by the AoE buffers in these teams. It's like a dream come true. For Feixiao E0, Hyacine just needs to skill on that first turn, and then she can ult and Ica will start attacking. Then you can basic Ica, that's a flying Aureus every turn. So a very nice option if you don't have a Venturine, but even if you do, she brings consistency. Of course, E2 Feixiao will prefer follow-ups though. The Herta runs Lingsha as her current best in slot, but basic into Ica is 24 energy for the Herta into 5 targets. You don't get that big burst of skill for UN, ult for UN, but instead you get tons of actions a cycle with, most of the time, a 5-target attack from Ica. And in general, Hyacine is just going to be a fantastic sustain that can kill things. You shouldn't die with her on the team, she's providing consistent heals and a max HP buff. She can use SP for more damage, or chill back and basic attack. In Pure Fiction specifically, she is a monster because of that AoE healing based damage. Sustains don't come around often, and when they come out they usually pop off and have teams and enemies cater to them. Hyacine is going to be yet another insane new sustain and should be top tier in every game mode. In my opinion, she is the best sustain right now. But finally her S1 unlocks a couple more teams. With Acheron and Hyacine S1 you have the best sustain for debuff generation outside of Venturine E2 S1, a 200 speed unit that can debuff every turn and ultimate. At E0 S1 Venturine could theoretically get more in some fights like Hule, but in general Hyacine should trump his power. Now Blade with Hyacine E0 S1 is so fun to play and feels so much better. I think with this and the 3.4 buffs he will unironically shine again. You have a HP buff, vulnerability and tons of charges for his follow-up. Now he can do more AoE damage, he can gain more energy and thus also ult more. She also provides damage of her own and maybe sometimes she's the real hypercarry, but this is a really nice win for Blade mains. So yeah, I think Hyacine is amazing. E0 S0 is fantastic, and E0 S1 unlocks more power and some comps, but isn't always necessary. Let me know what you think of her, and let me know if you're pulling. Like and sub as always if this helped, thanks for watching, and thank you to my amazing YouTube members. And of course, have a good day.